The colony registrar on Vane Station had a rule about strays: log them, tag them, forward them to the nearest holding shelter within 48 hours. It was a clean rule. It kept the paperwork simple. In 6 years behind the registrar's desk, Darren Hale had never once broken it. He broke it on a Thursday. The girl was sitting outside docking bay 7 when he arrived for his morning shift, cross-legged on the floor grating with her back pressed against the cold hull plating, knees pulled to her chest and arms locked around them. She was small, smaller than his filing cabinet, Darren thought absurdly, with skin the color of blue slate and hair the precise shade of the deep dark between stars. Her ears came to a slight point. Her eyes, when she looked up at him, were pale silver, almost colorless, like light trying to remember what color it was supposed to be. She was wrapped in a thermal sheet that had clearly come from the emergency kit mounted beside the bay entrance. Someone had cracked the orange casing and extracted it with some precision. The casing's catch was a two-handed mechanism with a recessed lever. She had figured it out alone in the cold, probably in the middle of the night. Smart kid, he thought. She did not speak. Darren set down his transit bag and crouched in front of her at a respectful distance, the way he'd learned to approach frightened things back on his grandmother's farm on Callisto, low and slow, and with his hands visible. He'd learned that from his grandmother herself, who'd had a philosophy about frightened animals and frightened people that amounted to the same thing: don't rush. Hey, he said. She looked at him without blinking. Her pupils were wide and dark in the pale silver of her irises. She had been sitting here for a long time. He could see it in the way she was holding herself, that particular stillness that comes when you have waited past the point where you expect anything. You hungry? Nothing, but her eyes tracked to his left hand, where he was holding his travel flask of coffee, and then back to his face. The tracking was involuntary. She hadn't meant to do it. Right, he said. Come on, then. He stood slowly. He didn't reach for her. He picked up his bag and took 3 steps toward the registrar's office and stopped. She hadn't moved. He didn't look back. He waited. He heard the thermal sheet rustle, then the careful sound of small feet on grating. She followed him at a distance of approximately 4 paces, close enough to keep him in sight, far enough to run if she needed to. He cataloged all of it without turning to look at her. In the office, he made 2 cups of the station's terrible coffee substitute, which was technically the only beverage the machine produced, whatever it said on the label, and set one in front of the empty chair across from his desk. He wrapped both hands around his own cup and looked at his morning intake cue and did not look at her. She took 20 seconds to sit down. She took another 40 to pick up the cup. He heard her drink. He kept his eyes on his screen. He had a meal bar in his desk drawer, the kind he kept for the long processing days when the canteen closed before his shift ended. He took it out and set it on the edge of the desk nearest to her, still without looking at her directly, and went back to his cue. The bar disappeared within about 30 seconds. He pulled up the intake log and put in her name, which he didn't have yet, as a placeholder, and started on the forms that would need to be filed to process a juvenile found on station without a registered adult. The forms were specific. There was a checkbox for species, which was fine. There was a checkbox for estimated age, which he left blank for the moment. There was a field for guardian of record, which he also left blank. He got through 3 forms before she spoke. Vale, she said. Her voice was very quiet and slightly rough, the way voices get when they haven't been used for a while. My name is Vale Tho Sierra. He typed it in. Vale Tho Sierra, he repeated to confirm. Vel Thorin. A pause, yes. Age. Longer pause. I don't know the station count. He looked up for the first time. Vel Thorin year cycles are about 1.3 standard. How many year cycles? She thought about it with a visible carefulness. 7. Close to 8. He cross-referenced with the developmental chart in the station's species registry and entered an estimated age of 9 standard years. You came in on the Mevath-Sorn freighter 3 weeks ago. She stiffened almost imperceptibly. You know about that. Bay 7 keeps docking records. A Mevath-Sorn freighter was the last large-capacity ship through here. If you were on it, you came in then. He looked back at his screen. I'm not the person who decides what happens next. I just make the form. This was technically true. He was also technically the only person in the office, since his colleague Preth was out with a knee replacement and had been for a month. But that was not information she needed. Do you have family on station? He asked. No. Family elsewhere, someone who knows where you are. The pause this time was long enough to tell him everything he needed to know about what it meant. No, she said. He looked at her across the desk. She was sitting in the chair with the careful posture of someone who has learned not to take up too much space, and she was watching him with those pale silver eyes in a way that was wary and exhausted at once. She had finished the meal bar and was holding the wrapper in both hands, folding it into smaller and smaller rectangles. The 48-hour rule was very clear. The holding shelter was clean and efficiently run. It had a long waiting list for placement. He had processed enough of these intakes to know what a long waiting list meant in practical terms for a 9-year-old who spoke limited station standard. He thought about his apartment on level 4, which had 2 rooms and a kitchen, and a second bedroom he was currently using to store 11 years of equipment catalogs he had never once consulted. You know how to clean? He asked. She blinked. What? Clean, dishes, floors, you know how to do it. She looked at him like this might be a trap. Yes. Good, he said, and went back to his intake queue. You can earn your room. He heard her fold the wrapper into one final rectangle. He heard her set it on the corner of his desk, precisely, in the way of someone who has been taught to leave surfaces the way they found them. He did not amend the form to include the holding shelter transfer. She did not clean the dishes, not at first. She sat on the edge of the couch in the way of someone who had not been allowed to sit on furniture in a long time, upright, arms close, feet flat on the floor, and she watched him move around the kitchen with that steady, cataloging attention he was already beginning to recognize as her natural mode. She held very still. The stillness, he understood, was something she had learned to rely on. He didn't push. He cooked a simple meal, rice from the dry store, protein from the station canteen's bulk section, something green and mild from a can that his mother would have categorized as a culinary failure, and that he had eaten twice a week for 6 years without complaint. He set a portion in front of her without comment. He set a portion in front of himself. They ate. She ate everything on her plate in the methodical way of someone who has learned not to leave anything, and then she looked at the empty plate with an expression he couldn't quite read. There's more, he said, if you want it. She looked at him. Then she looked at the pan on the stove. Then she looked back at him, and whatever calculation she was running came to a conclusion because she held out her plate. He refilled it. She ate that too. After dinner, he showed her the second bedroom. He had spent 45 minutes that afternoon relocating the equipment catalogs to his own closet, which had involved a degree of compression that he was going to be dealing with for some time. But the room looked like a room now rather than a storage unit. Bathroom is across the hall, he said. Hot water runs for about 10 minutes before the recycler kicks in, so if you want a full shower you should start early. Clean towels in the cabinet above the sink. He pointed. I get up at 5:30, you don't have to. He started to leave, then he turned back. There's a lock on your door from the inside. I won't come in without knocking first. He showed her the mechanism, a simple rotating latch. Try it. She looked at him, then at the door. Then she turned the latch. The click was solid and distinct. Good, he said, and went to do the dishes himself. He heard the door open behind him as he ran the water. He heard her cross the hall to the bathroom. He heard the shower start. He did the dishes. He went to bed. He lay in the dark for a while listening to the station's background hum, which he had stopped hearing years ago, and to the particular silence of an apartment that had more than one person in it. It was a different kind of silence, occupied somehow. He went to sleep. In the morning she was up before him. Sitting at the kitchen table with the perfectly straight posture she defaulted to whenever she was uncertain about something. She had found the kitchen, worked out which cabinet had the cups, and made herself a cup of water from the dispenser, not the coffee substitute, which she had apparently identified as suspect. She was sitting with both hands around the cup and looking at nothing in particular when he came out. He made coffee. He put bread in the toaster. He did not comment on the fact that she was up. "I don't know your name," she said. "Hale," he said. "Darren Hale. Most people on the station just use Hale." "Hale," she said, trying it. "Either one works," he said. The toast came up. He set a piece in front of her and sat down across from her. She looked at the toast. She looked at him. She ate the toast. "What do I do today?" she asked. "There's a census form I need you to fill in," he said. "You can do it here at the table. It's mostly demographic." He paused. "After that, nothing. Walk around if you want. Bay 7's food court opens at 9. Don't go past the outer ring junction without telling me first." He thought about this. "Actually, wait until tomorrow and I'll show you the layout. The station doesn't have good signage for people who don't know it." She nodded slowly. "You can ask me things," he said, "if you want to know something." She looked at him with the appraising steadiness that he was starting to realize was not wariness exactly. It was assessment. She was deciding how much to trust information from any given source. "Do you live alone?" she said. "Yes." "Why?" He considered this. "Didn't end up any other way," he said. She seemed to find this satisfactory. She drank her water. They ate in something that was not quite comfortable and not quite uncomfortable, a kind of provisional peace, two people discovering the rhythm of a shared space and making no assumptions about what it meant. Her name he learned to say properly over the following week. Vale though Sierra. The though was soft, and the Sierra carried a slight uplift at the end that was not quite a question. She had a faint lisp on the sibilants that she was clearly embarrassed about, pressing her lips together slightly after words that had it. He pretended not to notice until the day she corrected herself mid-sentence and looked mortified. "It's not noticeable," he said. She gave him a look that was the most expressive thing her face had done yet, a look that said she did not believe him and was skeptical of the attempt. "It's mildly noticeable," he said. "It doesn't matter." She held his gaze for a moment, then she went back to the census form. He had the sense that she was deciding, incrementally, whether he was reliable. He understood this. He didn't try to speed it up. On the 4th week, she did the dishes. On the 6th week, she started doing them before he asked, with the preemptive thoroughness of someone who has learned that unasked-for contributions are safer than requested ones. He noticed. He said nothing about it. He just started leaving the prep materials laid out, so she could see what he was planning to cook, and after a while she started chopping things before he asked for those too. The dynamic built itself, quietly, in the ordinary currency of shared meals and clean counters, and the small adjustments people make when they are learning to exist in the same space. The school on Vane Station was a 3-classroom operation run by instructor Korev, a compact Mevathi woman who had been promising to retire for 11 years and hadn't managed it yet, largely because the station didn't have anyone to replace her. She looked Vale over on enrollment morning with eyes that had seen every possible configuration of frightened and proud and said, "3rd class, mathematics at 8. Reading comprehension at 10. You'll take the placement assessment first. Come early." Vale was early. She came home the first afternoon with the expression of someone who had run a very long course and was privately pleased with the time but would not say so. She sat at the table and ate dinner with her usual economy and said, "The placement assessment had 17 sections." And he said, she ate another bite. "I completed 14 of them before the time was up." He had looked at the placement assessment once, years ago, when Korev had asked him to proofread the standard version. It was designed to take 2 hours. The standard approach was to complete about 10 sections. "That'll get you placed well," he said. She nodded and ate. He waited. "The other students looked at me," she said after a moment. "They'll stop," he said, "once you're not new." She considered this. "How long does that take?" "Depends on the students. Few weeks usually." She nodded again, with the air of someone calculating a timeline and deciding it was acceptable. She was right. In 3 weeks the other students had stopped looking, and one of them, a Mavathi girl named Sooth who had apparently decided that Vale was interesting based on some internal criterion she never explained, had started sitting next to her in the reading comprehension sessions. By the 6th week they were eating together in the canteen at noon, and Vale was coming home with something slightly different in her face, less watchful or watchful in a different direction. 3 months in, Instructor Korev sent a message along with the first formal assessment scores. I don't know what her previous schooling was, but in mathematics she is ahead of everyone in the 3rd class by some distance. Recommend moving her to advanced track for that subject. She's also, for what it's worth, very kind to the younger students. She helped 2 of the 1st class children with their reading this week without being asked. Thought you should know. He printed the assessment scores. He put them on the wall in the kitchen, just tacked up with a bit of adhesive straight. Vale came home and looked at them and looked at him. "That's where good work goes," he said, "on the wall. So you can see it." She stood in front of the wall for a long moment, looking at her name on the printout and at the score below it, and at the fact that they were on the wall at all, that someone had decided they belonged there. "I didn't have a wall before," she said. It was offered carefully in the quiet register she used for the things she meant most. "You've got one now," he said. He worked out her age by triangulating Korev's developmental notes, the species registry standards for Velthoran physical and cognitive maturity, and the slight inconsistencies in Vale's own account of time that told him she had probably compressed a difficult year into a shorter one in her own memory. 9 standard years, which he had already estimated, felt right. Full cognitive maturity for Velthoran people came at approximately 22. He did the arithmetic. He sat with the result for 2 days. Then he went to his own registrar's desk, waited until Preth was out for lunch, which took less patience than usual because Preth was a predictable person, and filed the dependency extension that registered Vale Tho Sierra as a dependent under his station residency. The forms were specific and somewhat obscure, and he had not filled them out before, which meant he had to look up several definitions in the station's administrative code, which took an hour and produced 3 additional forms he hadn't known existed. He filed all of them. He paid the registration fee himself. He stamped the completed packet with the office seal and entered it in the system. He did not tell Vale. She found out 2 weeks later when she needed her station ID updated for the school's records. The ID now listed her status as * dependent registered to Hale D. Registrar, Vane Station Level 2, Bay District. She came home. She stood in the kitchen doorway. She had a habit of standing in doorways, which he was beginning to think was a kind of threshold checking, a way of making sure entry was still permitted, and she looked at him across the kitchen. "Dependent," she said. "Yes." "You filed it." "Yes." "Why didn't you tell me?" He thought about this. "I didn't want you to think you had to do anything about it. It's just a form." She looked at the floor, then at him. "Why?" He thought about the several answers that were available. "You needed the ID updated," he said, "and you needed somewhere on the form to say you belonged, so." She stood in the doorway for a long time, then she went to her room, The lock clicked. But in the morning she made breakfast. She used the eggs from the cold box and something from the can he'd bought at the level 3 canteen market, and she had clearly not cooked eggs before because they were badly timed and slightly rubbery, and she had used too much heat, and the kitchen smelled like something approaching a small emergency. She set a plate in front of him without a word, and sat across from him with her arms crossed, and her expression arranged into the particular neutrality of someone waiting to be told they'd done something wrong. He ate every bite. "Eggs are good," he said. She looked at him. "The texture's a little firm," he said. "Lower heat next time or pull them earlier." She uncrossed her arms. She ate her own eggs, which were equally rubbery, without comment. He cleaned up. She helped. They went about the morning. He didn't say anything about the breakfast being her answer to the form. She didn't say anything about it either. They both understood what it was. The years were not quiet years. The years were full of the particular noise of a child becoming a person, and of a man learning, slowly, with many mistakes, what it meant to have one in his care. There was the winter she decided to learn to play the 17-string instrument in the common room that no one had touched since the previous resident had left it there, apparently in the grip of ambition that did not survive their first year on station. It was a Mavathi instrument, technically, and there were no instructions for it in any language she could read, so she reverse-engineered the tuning from a recording she found in the station's media archive. She practiced every evening from 1700 to 1900, with a dedication that was either impressive or alarming, depending on your relationship to the sound of strings being discovered. By the end of the winter, she was producing something that could be called music. By spring, Sooth's mother, who had Mavathi blood and knew the instrument from her grandmother, came to the door to find out who was playing. There was the spring she got into a fight. He got the message from instructor Korev at 1400 on a Tuesday. There was an incident at lunchtime. Vale is fine, she is not injured. Please come to the school at 1600. The message was careful and specific in the way Korev's messages always were when she was being diplomatic. He went at 1600. He sat in the small chair in Korev's office and listened to the account of what had happened. A boy named Torvesh, 12 years old, had said something about Velthoran people that Korev summarized in careful, indirect language that still managed to convey the content clearly enough. Vale had said something back. Torvesh had said something else. Vale had then, in Korev's phrasing, made her position clear in a physical way. Torvesh had a bruise on his jaw that was going to be noticeable for several days. Darren looked at Korev across the desk. Korev looked back. She had been doing this job for a long time. "What's the disciplinary process?" he asked. "She'll have 3 days of supervised lunch, and she'll write a statement about conflict resolution," Korev said. "Torvesh will receive a formal warning and will also write a statement about respectful language. His parents have been contacted." She paused. "I'll be direct with you. The language he used was not acceptable. My concern in this case is not primarily with Vale's response." "Understood," he said. "She's doing very well here," Korev said, "and this was a different kind of direct. I hope you know that." He walked home with Vale beside him. She was in a contained fury. He could see it in the set of her jaw and the particular quality of her silence, which was not the watchful silence he had first known but a heated one, pressed in on all sides. He waited until they were inside. "He was wrong," he said. "I know," she said. "The 3 supervised lunches are fair," he said. She exhaled, "I know." He said nothing more about it. There was nothing more to say. She knew what she knew, and she had made the decision she had made, and the bruise on Torvesh's jaw was, as far as Darren could privately assess, not a terrible outcome for the situation. He was not going to say that aloud. He made dinner. They ate. She was still somewhat heated through the meal, and she took an extra serving without asking, which she only did when she was working something through, and by the time the plates were cleared the heat had settled into something quieter. "Did you?" she started. "Yes," he said before she finished. She looked at him. "Yes," he said again. "When I was about your age, different circumstances, same general shape." She seemed to weigh this. "What happened?" "I had to write a statement about conflict resolution," he said, "and it was, I want to be clear, the most hypocritical thing I have ever put my name on." She made a sound that was not quite a laugh but was in that direction. It was only the third time he had heard it. He noted it, privately, the way he noted all of the sounds she made when her guard came down. She grew 4 inches in 8 months when she was 13, which Korev told him was entirely normal for Velthorin development, and which meant Darren bought new clothes 3 times in a year and a half, and developed a functional understanding of Velthorin body proportions that he had not anticipated possessing. She outgrew her shoes twice. She developed the habit of standing in doorways with her arms crossed, and her shoulders slightly forward in a way that he recognized, after a while, as her body being uncertain of itself. The recalibration that happens when you grow faster than you expected, and the space you thought you occupied doesn't match the space you're actually in. "You live here," he told her more than once, when he found her in a doorway. She would nod. She kept standing in doorways anyway. He started leaving them open wider. She was 13 when she started tutoring the younger students, first Sooth's younger brother, as a favor to Sooth, and then 2 first-class children who were struggling with the reading comprehension assessments. She did it without fanfare and without asking whether it was something she should do. She simply assessed the problem and applied herself to it. Korev mentioned it in the quarterly review message she sent to all parents and guardians in the school. Vale Sierra has become an informal resource for younger students this term. Several families have noted the improvement in their children's assessments. He told Vale about this at dinner. She ate for a moment. "Korev told you." She mentioned it. "The small ones aren't as patient as they should be," she said, which he recognized as her way of explaining that she found the work interesting. "No," he agreed, "they're not." "Sooth's brother has trouble with the letter-to-sound associations," she said. "If you practice just those associations separately, 10 minutes every day, the comprehension comes faster. It's a sequencing problem, not a comprehension problem." "That's a useful insight," he said. She shrugged, which was her way of agreeing with something she wasn't going to take credit for. He let it sit. He printed Korev's message. He added it to the wall. She was 14 when they had the fight. It was about a curfew, technically. She had wanted to stay at Sooth's family's apartment past 2200 for what was, by her account, an extremely important occasion involving a cultural event specific to Sooth's grandmother's tradition that would not happen again for several years. He had said 2100 was fine. She had said 2200 was necessary. He had asked why she needed the extra hour. She had said that was not the point. The fight was not really about the curfew. "You're not my father," she said. "No," he said, "I'm not." The words sat in the kitchen between them, which was where most of their difficult conversations happened. The kitchen had always been their common ground, the place where the daily business of eating together had built something neither of them had named. "But you're what I have," he said, and left it there. She looked at him. He looked back. He was not going to apologize for the curfew which he stood by. He was not going to apologize for the dependency form, which he also stood by. He had nothing to apologize for except the particular incompleteness of the thing they were to each other, which was not something he had created and not something he could fix. She went to her room. He washed the dinner dishes alone, which was unusual, and went to bed. In the morning she made tea. She had recently decided that the coffee substitute was contemptible, and had switched to a Velthorin leaf mixture she sourced from a vendor in the Bay 7 market. She made 2 cups and put one in front of him without looking at him and sat down with her own. "2200, he said. She looked at him over the rim of her cup. "This time," he said, "forsooth grandmother's thing, 2200. She drank her tea, okay. They ate breakfast, she washed up, they went about the morning. The fight resolved the way most of their disagreements resolved, not loudly but completely. The thing that had been said under the fight, the thing that had not been about the curfew, stayed in the kitchen too, but it didn't fester. It just was what it was, and they built around it in the way they built around everything they couldn't fix, by continuing. She was 16 when the first message came from the Succession Council. It arrived on his terminal, routed through the station's administrative channels, flagged priority by the outer system relay. He read it at his desk during the afternoon processing shift, a formal request for confirmation that one Vale Thosira was resident at Vane Station under the registered care of one Darren Hale. It was signed by the High Record Keeper of the Velthoran Succession Council. The signature carried the kind of formal authority that had a physical weight to it, even rendered in plain text on a station terminal. He sat with it for the rest of the shift. He brought it home. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and turned the terminal to face her. She read it. He watched her read it. He watched the stillness come over her that was different from her usual stillness, not collected but braced. She set the terminal on the table. "My mother," she said, "was the second daughter of the High Velketh." She paused. "The succession passed through the first daughter's line. That line had a son and two daughters. The son died in the transit disasters of 4 years ago. Both daughters were disqualified. One married out of the succession framework. One declined the registration." She was speaking carefully, in the tone she used for mathematical explanations, where precision mattered and approximation introduced error. "When I came here, the succession was stable. The third-generation claimants were numerous. I was ninth. Ninth is not a number anyone searches for." "You were 9 years old," he said. "Yes. And now?" "The message says fifth." She looked at her hands. "There was an epidemic on Veltho's second moon 3 years ago. 2 of the claimants above me were resident there." The kitchen was quiet. The station hummed its background hum. "Do you want to respond?" he asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "Not yet." "Okay." She stopped, started again. "Can I have some time to think about it?" "Take as long as you need," he said. "It's your life." She nodded. He got up and started dinner. She sat at the table for the better part of an hour, thinking in the focused, interior way she had, and he cooked around her silence. She ate, she helped with the dishes. She went to bed without mentioning the message again. She didn't respond for 3 weeks. When she did, she went to the outer system relay station to send it rather than using the apartment terminal, which told him the content was private. He did not ask what she had said. She did not tell him. He knew, the way he had learned to know things about her, not by asking, but by watching what she did next. What she did next was come home and do her mathematics coursework and make dinner and discuss an argument she'd had with Sooth about the proper interpretation of a historical event from 3 centuries ago, with the slightly heated animation she brought to things she cared about. She was fine. The response had said what she needed it to say. Messages came occasionally after that. She handled them privately. He made no adjustments to the apartment or to the routine. Life continued in its ordinary way. She left at 24. It was not sudden. She had been preparing for 2 years, studying the Velthoran administrative structures from the formal documents the council sent, corresponding via the outer system relay, making trips to the Velthran station relay hub 3 times for conversations she conducted privately. He watched all of this without comment and without pressure. She was 24 years old, and she knew her own mind, which had been true since she was 9, and had figured out how to open an emergency kit casing in the cold. On her last night on Vane Station, she made dinner. She had become a good cook. This was not remarkable. She approached everything she did with the same methodical rigor, and cooking, like mathematics, responded well to that approach. The meal was good, something traditional, one of the Velthorin recipes she had gotten from Sooth's grandmother, who had adopted her informally in the easy way Sooth's whole family had adopted her over the years. They ate. They talked about ordinary things, the station's new transit expansion into the outer ring, the mathematics competition she had won at 19, and whose certificate was still on the wall beside the first one from her third-class assessment. The wall had 12 items on it now. After dinner, she stood at the kitchen counter with her cup of tea and looked at the wall for a long time. "The first one is still a little crooked," she said. "I've never fixed it," he said. "I know," she looked at it. "Don't." He didn't ask why. He understood. The first one was crooked because he had put it up in a hurry, because he had just printed it and thought it should go somewhere, and the fact that it was slightly crooked was part of what it was, something done without calculation quickly, because it seemed right. She turned. Her silver eyes were steady. She was taller than him by 2 inches, had been for 4 years. She had the bearing of someone who had grown into their height and their certainty at the same time. "I don't know what's on the other side of this," she said. "No," he said. "You don't." "I know what I'm going to." "That's different from knowing what it'll be like when you get there," he said. She held his gaze. "Are you worried?" "Yes," he said. "That's not the same as thinking you shouldn't go." She was quiet for a moment. "Then I'll write." "I know you will," he said. She set down her cup and came around the counter and put her arms around him, which she hadn't done since she was 12 years old, and the station's fire drill had gone off at 2 in the morning, and she had come to his door in the dark, uncertain whether the emergency was real. He put both arms around her this time and held on. "Thank you," she said into his shoulder, "for the wall, a breath, for all of it." He held on for a moment longer. Then he let go, and she straightened, and she was still taller than him, and he was still mildly affronted by this after 4 years, and she knew it, and the corner of her mouth moved. "Go to bed," he said. "Early transit." "I know," she said. She went. He washed the cups and turned off the kitchen light and went to bed himself, and the apartment had the quality it had before she arrived, full of its own air and its own quiet. But it was not the same quiet. It was the quiet of something that had been here and left, which is a different texture than empty. He went asleep. She wrote. She had said she would, and she did. Not often, because the succession process was, as she explained in her first letter, the most elaborate and grinding administrative procedure she had encountered in her life, which was saying something given that she had grown up next to a registrar's office. The letters were practical and detailed and occasionally wry, which was the mode she used when something was difficult, and she was not going to say so directly. She told him about the council chambers, which were layered and formal in a way that the station's administrative offices were not, where every surface implied centuries, and every meeting had a protocol that was itself a statement. She told him about the other succession candidates, who were variously serious, calculating, warm, and alarming. She told him about the formal language requirements she was requiring. She had always been fluent in Velthorin Standard, but the council used the High Register, which had grammatical structures that were not in the common form, and which she was practicing every morning before the day's sessions. He wrote back. His letters were shorter, because there was less to report from Vane Station. The transit expansion, Korev's continuing refusal to retire, a mechanical failure in Bay 7's docking system that had taken 3 weeks to resolve, and had generated an amount of paperwork that he described in some detail because he knew she would find it funny. She did. Her reply said only, 3 weeks, Bay 7 specifically. I hope the equipment catalog collection proved useful, which meant she remembered the catalogs that had been in her bedroom before it was her bedroom. He had not mentioned this in the letter. 3 years into the process, She mentioned that one of the higher-ranking claimants had withdrawn due to health. 4 years in, another claimant passed away. She reported both of these in the factual, measured register she used for things that were complicated to feel, not without feeling, just with the feeling held precisely at the correct distance. 5 years in, she wrote, the council has reached a decision. I'll explain the formal structure in the next letter. Right now, I just want to tell you before you hear it on the relay announcements. It is my name they chose. I'm all right. I'm more than all right. I just wanted you to know. He read the letter twice. He sat at his desk in the registrar's office for a while with the terminal in his hand. Then he looked up the full Velthoran succession announcement in the Outer System Relay Archive and printed the whole thing, the formal declaration, the council's attestation, the succession name. He framed it. He put it on the wall, next to the mathematics certificates at the end of the row. He was 51 years old when the ship arrived. The announcement came over the PA while he was walking back from the Level 3 canteen, where he had eaten alone because his colleague was out sick. He was heading for the transit loop when the station's overhead system, which he had stopped registering as background noise sometime in his 30s, said something that made him stop walking. All personnel, docking bay 7 is restricted for the next 6 hours. Please redirect to bays 1 through 6 for all departures and arrivals. Vane Station extends its formal welcome to Her Radiance the Empress Vale Tho Sierra of the Velthoran succession, traveling on a private diplomatic registry from the Velketh homeworld. All clearance queries should be directed to the station administrator's office. Around him, transit workers and civilians and 2 people from the outer ring maintenance team all stopped in the corridor and looked at each other and looked at the ceiling and talked about what an Empress was doing at Vane Station, of all places. He turned around and walked toward Bay 7. The security presence was visible from the corridor junction, Velthoran formal plating, the deep blue-gray of the succession guard, 4 personnel stationed at a perimeter that politely but unmistakably communicated that the bay was not open to visitors. They were large and precise, and their armor caught the station's overhead lights in a way that was impressive by any measure. He walked toward the perimeter. The guard on the left stepped forward at 20 feet. Bay 7 is restricted. Please redirect to. Darren Hale, he said, station registrar. I've worked this bay for 22 years. The guard looked at him. He was aware, a 51-year-old human man in a station-issue jacket with a canteen receipt in his left pocket and what was probably some of his lunch on his right sleeve. He did not represent, visually, a particular threat or a particular authority. He can approach, said a voice from behind the guard line. He knew that voice the way you know something that has been part of your daily life for enough years to stop noticing it, known in the body before the mind catches up. He had known it when it was smaller and when it had a lisp, and when it asked him to explain things, and when it told him you're not my father in the kitchen in a way that was true and was also, in the full context of what they were, beside the point. The guard stepped apart. She was standing at the far end of the bay in the shadow of the ship's berth, and he was struck for a moment by the degree to which she looked like herself. He had been half prepared, he realized, for someone he didn't recognize, for the Empress to be something other than Vale. She was not. She was taller than he remembered, though he had seen the formal images and shouldn't have been surprised. She was wearing the robes of the succession, deep blue-black and layered, with a collar that rose to frame her jaw and the silver chain of office at her throat. Her hair was pinned in a way that managed to be elaborate without being severe. Her ears came to the same slight point they always had. Her eyes were the same pale silver, light remembering what color it was supposed to be. She walked toward him. She stopped 3 feet away, which was the distance she had always preferred when she was paying close attention to something. You didn't know I was coming, she said. No. I wanted to see what your face looked like when you didn't. And She looked at him, that old cataloging regard, the one that had been deciding things since she was 9 years old on a cold grating outside this very bay. "The same," she said, and the register of her voice shifted slightly from formal to something else, something that had nothing to do with councils or chains of office or the title that had preceded her through the station PA system. "You've gotten gray," she said. 15 years, he said. "You've gotten imperial." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. It happened incrementally. Behind her, her guards were maintaining a careful radius, close enough to respond if needed, far enough to hear nothing. Professional courtesy, extended with considerable skill. "How long are you here?" he asked. 3 days, she paused. "The diplomatic register has me at the administrator's office tomorrow morning. The afternoon is unscheduled." Another pause shorter. "I'd like to see the apartment." "It's the same," he said. "The wall." "The framed succession announcement is at the end of the row," he said. "I put it up when the relay message came." She went still in the way she had always gone still, not frozen but gathered, all of it drawn inward for a moment before it settled. She looked at him for a long beat. "The whole announcement," she said. "The full declaration," he said. "The council's attestation, your succession name, framed." He paused. "The frame is the same kind I used for the mathematics certificates. It's a consistent aesthetic." She looked at him, and he watched something in her face do the thing it had always done when she was deciding whether to take something as the gift it was instead of examining it for catches. The slight relaxation around the eyes, the breath she almost didn't take. "Come on," he said. "I'll make dinner." "You're a terrible cook," she said. "I've had 15 years of practice." "That doesn't help with eggs," she said. "You've always used too much heat." "The eggs are fine," he said. "They're firm," she said. They were, he knew, walking back through the bay toward the corridor junction, and her guards were falling into formation at a respectful distance, and Vane Station was going about its ordinary business around them. The canteen noise from level 3, the distant grind of the transit loop, the PA announcing something about Bay 4, and she was walking beside him. Not behind, not ahead. Beside, in the easy way of someone who knows the space they're walking in. In the apartment on level 4, she stood in the kitchen doorway for a moment in the old way, threshold checking, the same as it had ever been, and then she walked in and looked at the wall. He let her look. The certificates were there in the order she had earned them. The first mathematics assessment, still slightly crooked, in the original sleeve from instructor Korev. The advanced track placement. The 5 competition results, each in sequence. The tutoring commendation from Korev's formal quarterly report, which Vale had been quietly mortified about when he printed it and which had gone on the wall anyway. The succession announcement in its frame at the end, centered carefully, because that one had needed to be straight. She stood in front of it for a long time. "You kept all of them," she said. "Yes. Even the first one. Especially the first one." She turned. Her silver eyes were steady, but there was something in them that was older than steady, something accumulated, the weight of 15 years and a succession, and whatever it had taken to get from that first placement assessment to the formal chain at her throat. "I thought about this apartment," she said, "on the hard days which there were." "I know," he said. "I thought about the wall." "Good," he said. She looked at him. "That's all you're going to say?" "I made food already," he said. "It's keeping warm. Do you want to eat or do you want to continue analyzing the wall?" She looked at the wall, then at him. Then she sat at the kitchen table in the chair she had always used, which he had not moved or replaced in 15 years, and he put the meal in front of her. She ate with the same economy she had always had, and she told him about the succession process in the way she'd told him about things since she was 9, not summarized, but actual, in the real detail of what things were like to live through rather than what they looked like from outside. He listened the way he had always listened, He asked the questions that needed asking. She answered them. After dinner, she did the dishes. He sat at the table and watched her do them, which was unusual. Ordinarily, they divided the work and said nothing. She washed up with the thoroughness she brought to everything and dried and put things away in exactly the places they had always been. She came back to the table, she sat, she picked up her tea. "I looked for this station," she said. "In the records, when the succession process started and I had access to the council's archival databases. I wanted to know what it looked like from outside. And a mid-tier transit and trade hub in the outer system corridor," she said. "Population, 4,700. Registrar's office staffed by 2. She looked at him. "You were very small in the record." "Most places are from a distance." "Yes," she said. She was quiet for a moment. "I also looked up the dependency form, the one you filed." He waited. "The administrative code that governs it has a note attached," she said. "A historical amendment from 60 years ago. It says, and this is a direct quotation, the dependency registration is intended to provide stability and continuity for minor residents of the station who would otherwise lack a formal point of contact with the station's administrative framework. It carries no legal obligation beyond the filing period and may be dissolved by either party upon the minor reaching the age of legal majority or by mutual agreement at any time." "That's accurate," he said. "You knew that when you filed it," she said. "Yes. You filed it anyway. You needed somewhere on the form to say you belonged," he said, the same thing he had said 15 years ago at this table. That was still true. She held her cup in both hands, the way she had held the water cup on the second morning, when she had been 9 years old and uncertain of everything except that the coffee substitute was not to be trusted. "I found you," she said. "You knew where I was," he said. "You've always known where I was." "I know," she met his eyes, "but I wanted to come back. I wanted to come back and have this." She gestured slightly at the table and the wall and the dishes drying on the rack and the window with the station's night lights coming through it. "I wanted to see it still here." "It's here," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she got up and without ceremony or preamble put her arms around him. She was 2 inches taller than him and she had to bend slightly, the way she had for 4 years, and he reached up and held on. "Thank you," she said, the same thing she had said on the last night before she left, and it meant everything it had meant then and also more, because now there were 15 years on the other side of it, 15 years of letters and relay messages, and a framed succession announcement on a kitchen wall in a mid-tier transit hub in the outer system corridor. He held on for a moment. "There's tea," he said. She pulled back. "I know," she said. "I made it." "You're going to do the dishes again tomorrow," he said. "I don't mind the dishes," she said. He believed her. She sat back down, and he sat across from her, and the apartment held them both in the ordinary way of spaces that have been lived in, without fanfare, without ceremony, just present. Outside the window, the station lights made their usual patterns on the dark of the hull, and the stars were where they had always been, deep and far and indifferent, and she had crossed all of it to come back to this table, and he had just been here, and that was enough. It had always been enough. In the morning, before the diplomatic appointment, she made breakfast. She used lower heat on the eggs. She did not tell him she was doing this, and he did not comment on it. He ate every bite. They took the transit loop together to the administrator's office, which was on level 2, 2 floors below the registrar. He watched her settle into the formal register at the door. The slight adjustment of posture, the precision of the succession bearing, the way the chain at her throat caught the light, and then she was through the door and he was in the corridor. He went up 2 floors to his office. He processed the morning intake queue. He answered a query from the Bay 3 Port Authority about a late registered freighter. At lunch, he walked to the level 3 canteen, ordered the same thing he always ordered, and sat at a table by the window where you could see the station's outer ring if you knew which panel to look through. He was still there when she found him. An hour later, her formal appointment concluded and her afternoon unscheduled. She sat down across from him. She looked at the window panel. She looked at the ring. "Is this where you eat?" she said. "Most days," he said. "You can see the outer ring," she said. "If you know which panel." She looked at it for a moment, then she looked at him. "Show me what you ordered," she said. "I'll get the same thing." He did. She did. They ate by the window in the mid-tier transit hub that was small in the records and ordinary from the outside, and she told him about the appointment, and he told her about the Bay 3 freighter query. And outside the window the outer ring turned slowly in the station's regulated light. 3 days, she had said. 3 days was what they had. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything that had ever been enough, carried forward and added to, the way things accumulate when you pay attention to them, slowly, without fanfare, one ordinary day at a time. That was what the wall was about. That was what it had always been about. He thought about the framed announcement on the wall sometimes, in the weeks after she left, about why he had done it, why he had gone to the trouble of finding the right frame and centering it carefully, more carefully than the first certificate, which was still slightly crooked after 15 years. He had not done it because it was impressive. He had done it because it was hers. Everything on that wall was hers. The work she had done, the assessments she had sat for in Korev's small classroom, the competitions she had won, the commendation for teaching children who were not her responsibility and whom she had helped anyway because she'd identified a need and had the capacity to address it. He had put each one up because it was hers, because it existed, because she had made it and it should be somewhere. The succession announcement was no different. It was hers. It belonged on the wall. He thought he should write to her and say this, and then he thought she already knew it, and then he thought. She came back. She came back and stood in the doorway the way she always had and looked at the wall and said, "You kept all of them," and that was her saying it back. He wrote to her anyway. The letter was short. It said, "The apartment is the same. The wall is the same. The Bay 3 freighter turned out to be a registration error. They'd filed under the wrong code. Simple fix. Let me know how the second diplomatic meeting goes." She wrote back the next week. "The second meeting was less interesting than the first. I've enclosed the formal summary for your records. I thought the administrative language would amuse you. The eggs at the succession residence are also slightly rubbery. I believe this is a universal constant. V***. He read the letter twice. He read the enclosed formal summary, which was indeed impressive in its administrative particularity. He put both in the folder on his terminal with the others, which still had no label. He didn't know why he needed to label it. It was just veil. He went back to work. The mornings came as they always did, and the intake queue was the same, and the Bay District was the same, and the station turned in the regulated way of stations. Predictable, ordinary, built for continuity. He ate at the level 3 canteen by the window where you could see the outer ring if you knew which panel, and occasionally he thought about how she had sat there and looked at the ring and asked to get the same thing he ordered. He thought about the moment in the bay when the guards had parted and he had seen her, not the Empress first, but Vale, the way he had always seen her, the same eyes and the same bearing and the slight point of her ears, all of it continuous with the 9-year-old who had sat on the floor grating in a thermal sheet and tracked the flask of coffee with her eyes without meaning to. She had said, "I wanted to come back and see it still here." It was still here. He was still here. And she knew where to find him.